Serious, unserious, or for entertainment purposes only? We revisit this conversation as it pertains to some of the top headlines across the National Football League and take a look at the silver and black and where they are in their quest to go from being unserious to absolutely serious. That plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for July 16th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast, or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page, you know we appreciate both. Show continues to grow each and every day because of your consistent support and the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes each and every day on our YouTube page, making sure we look good and sound good every day, and he does a fantastic job. We definitely appreciate him. We shout him out. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line is 707-654-4693. And you can imagine plenty of feedback that we've been getting all week long, especially when we start talking about the Mount Rushmore for the Raiders and how that's basically impossible. So got a ton of feedback that we'll get to in segment number 3, calls, texts, not just about Mount Rushmore, but many different subjects brought to the table. Even have a tweet, as a matter of fact, that we'll bring to the table in segment number 3. Basically, it'll be your time to shine as we close out the show for today. Segment number 2, we'll take a look at the Raiders exclusively when it comes to serious, unserious, or for entertainment purposes only, as my guy Joe Fortenbaugh from ESPN relayed and presented to me a few months ago. Matter of fact, when Pete Carroll was announced as the head coach of the Raiders, Joe Fortenbaugh was on my radio show and broke it down and said 3 different categories of teams across the National Football League. And for the longest, as he knows, because he covered the Raiders not only in the Bay Area but here in Las Vegas, the Raiders were very unserious. Now they're trying to become a serious team. So let's go through the checklist in segment number 2 and see, are they on that verge or on their way to being serious? We'll do that all segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and we'll scatter shoot with news across the National Football League and see what teams are being serious and acting serious, what ones are unserious, and who is strictly for entertainment purposes only. We'll jump into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So let's go around the league real quick and talk about some of the top headlines. These are coming from ESPN's Adam Schefter. On Monday, 49ers wide receiver Jauan Jennings is scheduled to make $7.5 million this season in final year's deal, but he wants a new contract or a trade. That's what Adam Schefter tweeted out. 49ers extended Jennings' deal last year, but that does not change how Jennings feels about this year. And stop me if you haven't heard this about somebody that's in the 49ers organization wanting their contract taken care of. And stop me if you haven't heard about a 49ers pass catcher wanting something done with their contract. If it's not George Kittle, it's Deebo Samuel. If it's not Deebo Samuel, it's Brandon Ayuk. If it's not Brandon Ayuk, it's Jauan Jennings, right? Not to mention Trent Williams and others that have been holding out or have held out or caused this issue or some kind of rift because of their contract. From an organization in the 49ers that used to be very quiet, just go about their business, acquire talent, get ready for the upcoming season, and go out there and try to compete and put themselves in the biggest game that matters, is the Super Bowl. It seems like they have been very loose with it as of late, the last few years. All we hear heading into training camp, instead of quietness around organizations, and it's really good to be an organization that's quiet, instead of doing that, all you're hearing is just noise about contracts. So they're going from a team that I would put as a serious category to starting to be a little unserious when it comes to the way they handle their finances and all these players under contract that want new contracts. So that's for the 49ers. Then how about a team that's going from being unserious? No, actually, they weren't even unserious. They were for entertainment purposes only as of even last year. That is the New York Football Jets. They've made a couple of moves that has taken them from being for entertainment purposes only to trying to operate and function like a serious organization now under the leadership of head coach Aaron Glenn. First of all, on Monday, Jets and the wide receiver Garrett Wilson reached an agreement on a 4-year, $130 million contract extension, including $90 million guaranteed. Marks the first time in NFL history that a receiver has received an average over $31 million after playing only 3 seasons. Wilson now will be under contract the next 6 seasons, which is through 2030. Great for them. right? Because Garrett Wilson is a really good young talent. At the end of last season, with the whole Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, all the merry men that came with Aaron Rodgers that were going to put them over the top, put them in the playoffs, make them go win a Lombardi. Obviously, that didn't happen. Their head coach, Robert Saleh, got fired. Garrett Wilson didn't even look like he was going to be there. There was a chance that it looked like he was going to ask for a trade, right? Because it just wasn't going very well. He didn't know what was going on. It looked like a young talent, a sharp young talent like Garrett Wilson was going to get out of town because of all the sideshow and the circus act, the clown act that was going on in New York. Instead, Robert Saleh is gone, Aaron Rodgers is gone, Devontae Adams is gone, and all of a sudden they're building this team with a core of young talent, including Garrett Wilson. They signed him early. They didn't wait till, like the last second, like the team like the Dallas Cowboys do, or the Cincinnati Bengals, waiting so late, and then they have to pay Jamar Chase. They have to pay T. Higgins. They have to pay all these guys premium dollar. They signed him a year early. So now next time a wide receiver gets paid, they're going to go over that money, and that contract will look like a steal. But the Jets weren't done yet. On Tuesday, they reached an agreement with cornerback Sauce Gardner on a 4-year deal, ties him to the team for the next 6 seasons through 2030. Same structure and length as Garrett Wilson's deal from Monday. Gardner's deal includes $60 million guaranteed. Gardner will now be under contract for the next 6 years at an average of $24.3 million, a 4-year extension of $30.1 million average per year. Now both Gardner and Garrett Wilson are under contract through 2030 with no guarantees in 29 or 30. So again, getting their young talent sewn up. And yeah, right now, Sauce Gardner at that $30.1 million average for the extension is the highest paid cornerback in the league, ahead of Derek Stingley, ahead of Pat Surtain and others, J.C. Horn of the Carolina Panthers, even Jalen Ramsey at $24.1 million. But you watch when the next young corner gets paid, just like Pat Surtain just a couple seasons ago. Now all of a sudden, Pat Surtain is 5th in the pecking order when he's, oh, by the way, defending defensive player of the year. So again, getting out ahead of it early as opposed to waiting until, well, they go out and ball out in a contract year, as many players do, and then they've got to pay a premium or hit them with the franchise tag. They didn't have to worry about that. So the Jets are working their way to being a serious organization. That doesn't mean that they're going to win this year, go to the playoffs, or, hoist the Lombardi. That doesn't mean any of that, but they're headed in the right direction. Speaking of franchise tag, there was only one guy that held the franchise tag as of Tuesday, and that was Pro Bowl guard Trey Smith with the Kansas City Chiefs. And, oh, by the way, they reached an agreement on Tuesday right ahead of the franchise tag deadline on a 4-year, $94 million deal, including $70 million guaranteed, makes him the highest paid guard in NFL history. And some will say he actually left some money on the table. He probably should have turned that contract down and decided to hit the franchise tag and let it see how it played out. But the Chiefs made sure, as a serious team that knows that they have, the number one quarterback in the league and he needs protection, that they're going to go ahead and make sure they lock up the protection. So I don't have to go into great detail about the Kansas City Chiefs, but I will go into some great detail about the Washington Commanders. This team was one game away from the Super Bowl, Jaden Daniels' rookie year. Now his star wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, is frustrated. He's upset. He's almost 30 years old. He wants a contract extension, and he wants a contract extension that eclipses $30 million a year. He's not thrilled that it hasn't happened, and he's even talking about possibly not showing up or participating for training camp. Matter of fact, he spoke with the media on Tuesday. Here's what Scary Terry had to say.
I think, there has to be some active discussions, what I mean? Like I said, we haven't talked in over a month, and obviously with camp around the corner, it's becoming a little bit of crunch time. And, obviously you want to be in a position where you're building to what we did last year, and Jaden and I continue to build along with the offense. And that was the thing, before I took a step back, it was things were going great on the field. And, the connection and the offense and the energy was just amazing. And so to see where it was then and where it's at now is definitely disappointing. So I don't necessarily know what happens next, but without any progressive discussion, it's kind of hard to see how I step on the field. So
he spoke with the media for a long time. That was only 45 seconds, but he spoke with the media for a good lengthy amount of time about his frustrations and where he's at. The problem for Scary Terry is he's almost 30 years old, right? And you know what it is in the NFL. Once you get to 30 years old, they start looking at you like, oh, man, you're too old. You're not going to be able to get it done. So how much does the Commanders want to invest in him? Now, I think that the deal will get done. I really do. But for a young team with a young quarterback, and that's their star wide receiver, that's the kind of noise that I'm talking about. You don't need that kind of noise headed into training camp. They're a couple days away, just like the Silver and Black are, from going into their training camp and getting things started and trying to build for this year. and they've got to worry about their star wide receiver not being there. As he referenced, they did some really good things, him and Jaden last year, but now he's, sitting on the sideline upset because of his contract. So we'll continue to monitor what happens. I doubt that he gets moved, but you never know. There could be a chance. And look, I didn't even bring up the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know the situation going on with TJ Watt. They are a very noisy organization. Shocking. Aaron Rodgers goes from the Jets to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and all of a sudden the Steelers are very noisy. And it's not even really his fault, right? I mean, they went and made the move for DK Metcalf. They brought in other guys like Jalen Ramsey. They moved Minka Fitzpatrick, and then TJ Watt's upset. So there's a lot of noise going on around the Pittsburgh Steelers organization that's a pretty quiet organization, not one that's usually out there making a big fuss or being in the spotlight. Hey, look at me, look at me. Again, I've said it all offseason long. Very strange offseason for the Steelers. Very un-Steeler-like. Like I've been told, Max Starks, who's won a couple Super Bowls with the Steelers, told me, Q, this is not your father's Steelers. He's not wrong. But there you go. Those are some of the teams around the league that's got the biggest headlines right now as it pertains to the serious, unserious, and for entertainment purposes only conversation. What about the Raiders? We'll break them down coming up, segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that is FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Folks have been using FanDuel for a long time. They can track their favorite matchups. The apps keep it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. And it's so easy to use. They got fast payouts and make even regular season games feel like must-watch events. And the All-Star game, right? That was going on Tuesday. The Home Run Derby was Monday. You can even get action there if you want to in an all-star type showcase. You could place a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning. FanDuel makes it easy and makes you feel like you're part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, no problem. New customers could bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Went through segment number 1, talked about some other teams that are making headlines right now across the National Football League and put them in the serious, unserious, or entertainment purposes only. And this is something Joe Fortenbaugh from ESPN, my tag team partner on Joe and Q on ESPN Radio, presented on my radio show, my local radio show on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness, right when we started our show. That was back in February, right after the Super Bowl got wrapped up, and he presented these 3 categories. So if you didn't hear what he had to say, here's Joe Fortenbaugh breaking down the 3 categories that he believes there are in the National Football League.
It's fairly simple. There are the serious teams, which are obvious. Kansas City's a serious team. Philadelphia, Baltimore, Buffalo, San Francisco. They take their business seriously, and it shows. You don't necessarily have to win 12 games to be serious, but you need to be the type of team that goes about your business with a plan. Then we have the unserious teams. This would be the Cleveland Browns. This would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you got that team, Tennessee, teams like that. You don't have to worry about these teams. They'll never be around at the end. Then there's category 3, for entertainment purposes only. These are teams that you don't need to take seriously because they're not going to contend for a title. You don't put them in the unserious category because they're actually out there making all types of noise and headlines, and they're very talkable. And that's the Dallas Cowboys. They are here for our entertainment. In any business, every competitor cannot be successful. It doesn't work like that in a free market. You have to have the good eating the bad. The market will weed out the weak. But in the NFL, you can't just make teams disappear. So the good teams will just essentially make the bad teams bad teams. And that's who the Dallas Cowboys are. They're here just to entertain us. It's no surprise that 2 days after the Super Bowl was over, they've all started taking turns talking. It's Dak on Wednesday. It's Micah on Thursday. Jerry's probably up Monday to get us going again. But that's how they handle their business. For entertainment purposes only, not to be taken seriously.
So, Joe, as we fast forward this and look towards the Raiders, how do Pete Carroll, Tom Brady, John Spytek, how do they take the organization and turn them into a serious team?
So previous to this offseason, they absolutely were unserious.
Okay.
Like, absolutely. They were the poster child for the unserious category. And I followed them for a while when I was covering them in Las Vegas. Mark Davis, try as he might to make good decisions. for one reason or another, they wouldn't work out. General manager hires, coaching hires, player personnel. I mean, you name it. They just could not figure it out. But this offseason is very interesting. Tom Brady comes in as a part-time owner. That's a serious guy. Not part-time, partial owner.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll comes in as a head coach, a man with a lot of success. Now, say what you want about his age. The thing about Pete is he's a successful guy with a proven track record. The Raiders don't do that a lot when they hire head coaches, right?
Right.
Like, this is a pretty big get for them. So right now, when I look at how they're handling their business, I'm starting to take them seriously. It doesn't mean they're going to win, but I do take them a little bit more seriously. Got to get yourself a quarterback, and you got to continue to build out the roster. It's going to take some time, but just show the people that you have a plan, right? If you come away from this draft with no quarterback, well, and you come away from free agency with no quarterback, what are we supposed to think about you going into this year? Because I'm pretty sure Raider fans have heard, just give us a year, just give us some more time, more often than they'd like.
Joe Fortenbaugh right there from ESPN talking about serious, unserious, or entertainment purposes only. So we're going to focus on the silver and black. You heard me ask the question at the end, well, how do the Raiders, how do Pete Carroll, how do they go from being unserious, or how do they just get into that serious category? And he said, hey, I like the moves that they're making, especially with Pete Carroll, right? He called the Raiders at one point unserious. Matter of fact, the poster childs for unserious. But you bring in Tom Brady, partial owner, Pete Carroll, successful head coach, right? Says he has a track record. He has a resume of being successful, right? Go get a quarterback, build the roster, show the people you have a plan, right? Free agent or draft when it comes to the quarterback. So I think that we can all agree that the Raiders have showed that they have a plan. John Spytek, the GM, Pete Carroll, the head coach, I think they all show that they have a plan. Right, a lot of times we know that teams have plans. We know the Raiders have had plans. We just couldn't identify what in the world the plan was, right? So now you start to look at it, and you start to look at some of the moves that you've seen now that the Raiders have this new staff in place led by head coach Pete Carroll. They brought in Geno Smith, right? What did Joe say? Go get a quarterback. Free agency or the draft, they went and traded for one, right? Geno Smith, a guy who's an established veteran quarterback who's had success under Pete Carroll. So it's not like they're getting someone that they don't know what they're getting. And not to mention now Chip Kelly is the offensive coordinator who's an established offensive coordinator, an established play caller in football in general, college and the NFL, right? So now you know that you got a guy that has some skins on the wall when it comes to just having success as a play caller. So now you're not getting some guy who was ran out of one town, ran out of another town, and, I think he'll be better in this town. No, you're getting an established play caller, and they spent serious money to make sure Chip Kelly was a part of the mix. So Geno Smith is the QB, Chip Kelly is offensive coordinator, Pete Carroll the head coach, right? And then to double down when it comes to the quarterback, they did draft one as well, 6th round, Cam Miller. We'll see if he turns into something. He's one of 3 QBs on the roster right now, along with Aiden O'Connell. We'll see if he can develop into something. But they did go and make sure they had the quarterback position taken care of as far as they were concerned, at least for this year. Geno Smith and Cam Miller. Not saying Geno Smith's going to be there for the next 5-10 years. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but he's at least a guy that you feel pretty competent to get the job done. All right, so check. All right, next thing. Build the roster. So let's see. They went out and, they lost some free agents, right? There's no doubt about that. They brought a couple guys in. They didn't spend a ton of money in free agency. But when it comes to building the roster, they drafted Ashton Genty. They drafted 3 wide receivers in Best, Thornton, and Malott. Not saying that everyone's going to turn into some star, but just letting you know where they went. They drafted 2 offensive linemen in round 3, guard Caleb Rogers and tackle Charles Grant, back-to-back picks. So they addressed that, provided some extra depth along the offensive line, and actually some guys that are probably going to, be part of this offensive line competition in training camp that starts on the 22nd with the rookies reporting on Thursday. They also drafted 2 defensive linemen, Tonka Hemingway in the 4th and J.J. Pegues in the 6th, right? Again, not saying that these guys are going to turn into stars, but they provided some more depth at the defensive tackle position, especially when you have questions with the big fella Christian Wilkins, if and when he's going to be available. You know that they brought back Adam Butler, another good signing, right? That was smart to make sure that they got him in the mix after what he was able to do last year, sliding in there for Christian Wilkins. They still need Wilkins back, but they also have put up a plan just in case. They've got some other guys that they feel like can step up, young guys that they can build around as well. So that was the draft. I mentioned moves like signing guys, re-signing guys. One of the biggest moves that the Raiders and best moves that the Raiders made this offseason was signing Max Crosby early. Right? I mean, I remember being in New Orleans on Radio Row, preparing for Super Bowl 59. I was actually filling in on Greeny that day. It was me and Hembo. Max Crosby came and sat down with us, and he still wants his contract taken care of for the Raiders, right? And he also wanted to see the plan that Pete Carroll and John Spytek had is for this team to be a really good team. And he walked around and told anyone that he sat down and interviewed with that, hey, man, the money's got to be right. I understand what Myles Garrett's going through. I'm one of the best in my position as well, and I need my money taken care of, right? Myles Garrett came out for the Cleveland Browns on that Monday leading into Super Bowl 59 and said, hey, I want to trade. I'm going to make money. I don't care about money. I want to trade, right? And he told anybody and everybody that he wanted out. That was on Monday on Radio Row there in New Orleans. I remember it like it was yesterday. So what did the Raiders, what did John Spytek and company do? They went out and signed Max Crosby early. So there was no drama. Right? He didn't miss OTAs. He didn't miss mandatory minicamp. He's not going to be holding out a training camp. You're not hearing him on his podcast. You're not hearing him on McAfee. You're not seeing him on ESPN. You're not hearing speculation about is he or is he not going to be? Is he going to get traded? None of that. Right? He's locked in with what Pete Carroll, John Spytek, Patrick Graham, Robbie Leonard, everyone's trying to do within that organization. And remember, he was the highest paid non-quarterback for 4 days. And then I woke up that Sunday morning and, well, Myles Garrett, the guy who said money didn't matter, was all of a sudden agreeing to a deal that was going to get paid $40 million a year as an edge rusher. And why is that so significant? Because since Max Crosby signed that contract, he's now like the third or fourth highest paid non-quarterback in the league, right? I mean, you've got guys like Jamar Chase ahead of him, the wide receiver out of Cincinnati. You've got Myles Garrett there at $40 million a year. Even Danielle Hunter, who's part of the Houston Texans, is getting paid more than Max Crosby is at this stage of the game, right? Because, again, he got signed early. John Spytek made sure that was a priority, took care of him right away, and didn't have to pay the extra tax that everyone else is paying. And, oh, by the way, right, T.J. Watt of the Steelers wants a deal. Trey Hendrickson of the Bengals wants a deal. Micah Parsons of the Cowboys wants a deal. The money just goes up and up and up. You're going to look up pretty soon and say, man, Max Crosby, that's a steal. Right? That's a steal, but that's the smart part of getting out front and handling your business. I've said it before. I'll say it again. The Eagles make this happen all the time. They're very smart when it comes to signing their core guys, signing them early, making sure they're happy and letting them go out there and just ball out. You know you're going to keep them anyway. Why are you hesitating? That's how Jerry Jones ended up paying Dak Prescott $60 million a year. $60 million a year. Because he waited up until about, 10 minutes before kickoff, right before they were going to take on the Cleveland Browns to agree to a deal with him. Just drug his feet, did the same thing with CeeDee Lamb. Jerry does not take, he doesn't have a sense of urgency when he does anything. The reason why they're for entertainment purposes only. He didn't even have a sense of urgency when he hired his coach. Remember, he was the last guy to hire their coach in Brian Schottenheimer for the Cowboys, and he was on the staff. They could have hired him first if they wanted to, but they fired their guy. They let Mike McCarthy walk last, and they hired their guy last. Again, entertainment purposes only. Not to mention, getting back to the Raiders, they made a bunch of additions to the front office, right? Analytics department is grown. Pete Carroll showing that he'll evolve. He doesn't mind bringing another element and saying, hey, this is something that's heavy, as a part of our game. The analytics side of things, something he didn't use a whole lot while he was in Seattle. He's welcoming that in because he wants to be innovative. He wants to be at the forefront of what's going on. John Spytek knows how important the analytics department is, so they've evolved that. They've continued to hire guys on the analytics side of things so they can have that ready to go on game days, right? Scouting department. They've hired guys from respected organizations, right? Teams that draft really well, like the Eagles. Right? Talk about Howie Roseman all the time. Even the Broncos, they have plenty of talent that they've drafted. The Jets, they've had plenty of talent just based off of what I said in segment number 1. Right? When you're hearing about, these guys getting contract extensions even early because they have that much young talent. So the Raiders have continued to evolve, it feels like, every element of their team. So it doesn't mean that they're going to go win 10, 11 games and they're going to be a playoff team. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to blow smoke up your backside and get you fired up like that. But I think they're definitely in the conversation of a team that's operating as they're serious. Obviously, they've got to get into camp, which the rookies report on the 17th, the veterans on the 22nd, put it together, right? All come together on the same page. Obviously, if you're on the offensive side of things, you've got to learn Chip Kelly's offense. If you're on the defensive side of things, you're still young, so you're going to have to step that up. There's areas that they still have some concerns. I'm not saying it's all rainbows and puppy dogs for sure, but they have an opportunity. They're giving themselves a chance, right? Is it going to come together on the offensive line? That's a question, right? Until it isn't. Until they show that there's not a question, that's going to be a question. The wide receivers, they're for the most part, unproven except for Jacoby Myers. Right, he's proven who he can be, but everyone else is not really proven at the wide receiver position. Brock Bowers is a tight end. He's a different subject, right? The secondary, very young defensively, and the linebackers, they're all new to the team. So are they going to be able to pick it up? So they have their own questions, but again, they're operating as a serious organization. They didn't spend too much money in free agency just on names. There was guys that were out there. You saw the money that they let go, the guys that they let go to other teams, and the money that they got, like a Nate Hobbs, a Trayvon Merrick, Robert Spillane, right, Marcus Epps, guys like that. They're going to get compensatory picks for next year's draft. Again, that's also planning to be a serious organization. The smart, serious, really good organizations, they get those comp picks. They're comfortable with letting certain guys go. They don't just fall in love with their name or the fact that they've been with the team for a long time. They're comfortable letting them go. They trust in themselves where they can draft and develop, and they also feel like they can cherry pick a free agent here, a free agent there, and be good. And then you'll see them strike for a big free agent at some point or make a big trade at some point because they have the assets, they have the ability to be able to do that because of what they've done basically through the draft. And that's how John Spytek, the Raiders GM, wants to operate. He wants to operate through the draft and develop, which we all agree is the best way to go. So I would say check on all the boxes when it comes to the Raiders operating like a serious organization. We'll obviously revisit this conversation once the season gets going, see how it looks on the field. Are these players coming together? Is Geno Smith really the quarterback that we're expecting him to be? Is Brock Bowers still that guy in year number 2? Is Ashton Genty the rookie that he's, hyped to be, right? How is this team doing? Well, again, like I said, we'll revisit this conversation in the regular season, but I would say right now on, just a couple days out from heading into training camp, the Raiders are definitely operating like a serious organization. Coming up in segment number 3, we're going to hear from you, your calls and texts, and even a tweet, 707-654-4693, or at RA Producers on Twitter, at your boy Q254. That all comes up as we close out the show next. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. We'll actually start off with a tweet at your boy Q254. This comes from RaiderCam81 at RaiderCam81 on Twitter, talking about the Mount Rushmore conversation that we've had for the past couple days. He said, "This is why the Raiders can't retire numbers, Q. There wouldn't be any left. Hashtag Mount Rushmore." Short, sweet, to the point. Spot on. There's no doubt about that. And it's funny, I had Lincoln Kennedy on my radio show on Tuesday, and we were kind of having the conversation about Mount Rushmore and the Raiders greats and how they historically as an organization have had so much talent in the building, including himself. And, he said that someone had asked him one time, well, how come the Raiders don't have a Ring of Honor? And he said that Al Davis told him, yeah, I can't have a Ring of Honor. I've got way too much talent. There's no room in the stadium for a Ring of Honor with all the talent that we've had. I would love to see similar to what I saw in Lambeau Field in Green Bay, where they have, Titletown for that stadium, and they have kind of their Hall of Fame for the Packers. I'd love to see the Raiders, near the facility, put up this just awesome shrine, like a big building that has all the Raider greats and tells their stories, and people can come and learn about the history all the way up to the present day for the Silver and Black. I would love to see something like that, but Lincoln Kennedy's absolutely right. Al Davis was absolutely right. You can't have a Ring of Honor. There's not enough room. There's not enough stadium to have a Ring of Honor. They've got too many all-time greats. So, yeah, at RaiderCam81, you were spot on. Up next, we get a call from Leo, my guy Leo in the IE. He's calling to give his Mount Rushmore from his era, the players that he saw. Here he is, Leo in the IE.
Pew, what's up, brother? Leo, out here in the IE, man. Man, I've been listening all week to a lot of these different Mount Rushmores, and I got to share mine. Now I understand putting up the autos, stablers, they were the face of the team, but I, for one, have to make mine based on what I've seen and who I've experienced. With that being said, it was hard even then, just thinking about it. But my 4, based on the era I grew up in and big-time Raider fan, it's got to be Jim Plunkett, Howie Long, Marcus Allen. Right? Now, the 4th one was the one where I struggled because I love Charles Woodson. So I think you're right, though. It's hard to be able to do it as a Raider fan and just pick 4. But for me, it's got to be my main ones are Jim Plunkett, Tim Brown, Marcus Allen. And it hurts to leave somebody out. But I love Charles Woodson so much. as a player, as an individual. But those would be my top 4 right now based on what I've seen. Of course, eventually Max is going to be in there for me. But, hey, I appreciate you creating this list. And I totally agree with you, though. It's unfair that we weren't allowed to put people like Flores or Madden or especially Al Davis up there. But, hey, keep doing your thing, Q, and hopefully I'll see you at spring training this summer.
Big Leo, it's always good to hear from you, man. Definitely appreciate you. And I'm a little confused. It sounds like you switched things up. You started Plunkett, Howie Long, Marcus Allen, and then you paused and you started talking about Charles Woodson, and then you brought in Tim Brown to the conversation. So is it Plunkett, Long, Marcus Allen, Tim Brown? Is it Plunkett, Brown, Allen, C. Wood? Right? Again, I don't blame you, right? Those are just the guys that you saw, right? The guys that you were fired up about. And it's hard to just narrow it down to 4. Again, you can't really do a Mount Rushmore for the Raiders. There's just too many greats. I even did a fun little exercise on my radio show on Tuesday where I said, who would you be on your Mount Rushmore for the Raiders if you couldn't use Hall of Famers? And it was still so many different names that were out there. That just lets you know how much talent they've had in the past and, well, where we'd all like to see this organization get back to, being that team, that organization that has all kind of talent, gets it from everywhere. Draft, right? Guys from the scrap heap that others may have, moved on from, and the Raiders found the talent in them and they bring them in. I mean, just everything, right? I mean, the Raiders have such a great history of being able to get talent from anywhere. Would love to see them get back to that. Leo, thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Got a text from Refrigerator Raider. Yo, Q, Chargers got some new uniforms. One is all yellow. Chiefs color rush is all red. Ketchup and mustard game. Let's go. As far as the Raiders are concerned, I've always been a little bummed that their color rush scheme wasn't all black since other teams went that route, but I digress. Would it kill them to get an alternate black helmet? Tell me if that's blasphemy, or we could play with that silver and black just a little bit. That's Refrigerator Raider. I'm obviously not in charge of that category, but what I can tell you, but what I've been told from people inside the organization, that the Raiders don't plan on having any kind of change to their uniform at all. Like that's basically a no-go. Now, again, things could always change. They might be presented with some idea and they decide that, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and do it. They may, just decide that it's something that they want to do. I think it'd probably be pretty cool, but I understand the history. I understand how I think the uniform is perfect. So it doesn't bother me. They don't really need anything to change, but I'm also a guy that likes, white Nikes all the time. I'm very simple. I got a closet full of white Nikes. Right? It may have a little accent here or something else, and an accent there or something else. I'm very simple. So me seeing the silver and black uniforms of the Raiders and the helmets, they're good for me. But what I've been told, and again, like I said, things could always change, and it's not like I was told by Mark Davis. It was someone else in the organization said it's just not going to happen. There's not going to be any change to the Raiders uniform. So there's that. I don't know what that means, but that's just me passing along the information. Thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Eddie in Denver. Calling to talk about Brock Bowers, who's voted and ranked number 1 tight end in the league by executives, scouts, and coaches, and has a question when it comes to Broncos versus Raiders and Sean Payton. Here's Raider Eddie in Denver.
Hey, Q, what's up? This is Raider Eddie in Denver. Hey, I'm calling in. I want to ask you about Brock Bowers because we've had a few people talking about Brock Bowers. You've talked about Brock Bowers. I heard the squad show. Lincoln Kennedy said he doesn't think Brock Bowers is the best tight end in the league yet. I have to disagree with Big Link on that one. I mean, Brock Bowers, he's not the biggest tight end. He's not the best blocking tight end, but just as an athlete, the guy is so special. I can't remember a tight end I've seen like this guy. He's very, very special. And so, Q, I want to ask you about the Broncos game in Denver last season. Brock Bowers is already making some hay at that time. Best player on the field in that game, Raiders here in Denver. But I noticed that Sean Payton's defense really pushes the envelope and, in my opinion, passes the envelope in terms of physical to dirty play. And there were 2 hits that I remember the Broncos had on Brock Bowers, helmet-to-helmet hits. Right at the end of a tackle, like often it was like the second guy coming in would nick Brock in the head with the tackler's own helmet. Like, I think it might have been a safety, maybe a defensive back, but it happened twice in that game. I could tell they were trying to send a message and take out our best player. And Q, I want to know, did you notice that? If you ask around, did you hear anything about that? And I'm really sick of Sean Payton, and with what he did with the Saints and Bountygate. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's what Sean Payton preaches, and I just really hate that type of play. I don't want to lose Brock Bowers. I don't want him to lose years off his career, and I don't like the Broncos either. So just curious if you noticed anything like that, if you have any concerns about that, and if the Raiders have talked to the league at all about that, especially after that game. All right, Q, love the show. Go Raiders.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate you. As far as what Big Lincoln had to say about Brock Bowers, he was just saying from a player's point of view, it was a little early to give him the number one nod as a tight end and things that he can improve on. And I mean, I'm not the smartest dude in the world, but I trust pretty much what Big Lincoln says when he's, on the broadcast and says, hey, there's a couple things that Brock Bowers could do a little bit better. I think he's phenomenal. Right? We all knew after his rookie year he was going to be one of the top tight ends for scouts, executives, and coaches to name him number one. That's a great honor, right? And so he'll take that, but I guarantee that he knows there's things that he can work on. But that's all Lincoln was saying. He wasn't throwing him any shade or anything. He just said, hey, it's 1 year, maybe a little early for the number one spot, and there's things that he can do that he needs to work on. As far as the plays that you're talking about, the Broncos and the helmet-to-helmet hits on Brock Bowers, I mean, the Broncos defense, especially under Sean Payton, like you said, that's kind of who they are, right? I mean, look, I remember those plays that you're talking about against Brock Bowers. There's plenty of plays that you could see from the Denver Broncos. I mean, the game is physicality. We always talk about play to the whistle, play through the whistle. I don't like the headshots like that you mentioned. There's no room for that. I'll even go back to 2023 when Jacoby Myers week 1, got drilled in the head by Kareem Jackson, and he had a really good game that way in the week and then was concussed and ruled out week 2 versus Buffalo. Right. So I don't think you're wrong when you talk about the way that they play, especially under Sean Payton. I'm sure he's one of those guys that, wants them to push it to the whistle, through the whistle, and play a little physical. I don't think it's exclusive to just the Raiders. I think it's just what Sean Payton and how he coaches. Obviously, we all remember Bountygate when he was the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. So, there's multiple occasions when you can see some shots like that on Raider players. But I saw a lot of those shots on Raider players from multiple teams throughout the course of the season, and that's just kind of how it is. Sometimes it's, you look at it and I think it's, I don't want to say on purpose, but it's a kind of a dirty hit, and then other times it's just a tough scenario. So it's so fast, bang, bang, a player goes from being high up here to low, then all of a sudden a guy may be going a little bit low trying to aim at his belly or whatever and drills him in the head when he gets down. So there's so many different reasons for headshots, but it's definitely something that they need to get out of the game. There's nothing worse than these guys getting concussions. You just don't want that. So thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got time for a couple more. Got a text from Ohio Raider in the 419. What's up, Q? Much love. I love the Mount Rushmore exercise and hearing everyone's picks. So many great Raiders to choose from. How could we go wrong? But I think doing this Mount Rushmore exercise just reminded me of how bad of a franchise we've been lately. All those greats were from the past. We have not won a playoff game since January 19th, 2003. Hope we can get back to being Raiders of old and be a consistent team every year. Ohio Raider from the 419. Go Raiders. Spot on, spot on, spot on. One of my points of even bringing up the conversation here on the show, right? The Raiders need to get back to being that team that was once feared. The Raiders need to get back to being one of those teams that had the most talent, bigger, faster, stronger, right? They were ahead of the curve with everything. They need to get back to that. And that's the task that Pete Carroll has. That's the task that John Spytek has, getting them back to the great organization that they once were. Thanks so much for the text. We'll close out with a call from Georgia Raider. He's calling to ask a couple questions. One, talking about contracts, and two, Geno Smith at quarterback. Here's Georgia Raider.
Hey, Q, it's Georgia Raider. Wanted to check in. Had two questions. One, we've talked a lot about guaranteed money, and I wanted to know more in depth about it. I don't grasp it. I don't understand it because I know we've talked about it with Jack Vetch's his contract and even Colton Miller right now, but what's the difference between guaranteed money and a guy being on contract for a year like Colton Miller? He's on contract. He's going to get paid. But, what's the difference between that and guaranteed money? I might be naive and just need to Google it, but thought I'd call and ask about your thoughts on it. And then the second part I was going to ask about was getting the vibes. I'm very excited about this year. Geno Smith, 8 to 9 wins, all on the same page. But I do want to, get your take on the thoughts of the comparison between Geno Smith and Derek Carr. I feel like we're getting back to where we were with Derek Carr before we hired McDaniel and went through this 3 year of just chaos. But felt like we're in the same boat again. Derek Carr, Geno Smith, Ashton Genty, Josh Jacobs. We got Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar. We got an average defense in my mind. You got a lot of guys that are big question marks, and so which is fine. But I guess my question to you, Q, is who's better in your mind, Geno Smith or Derek Carr? And I'm not asking about today. Derek Carr's retired and Geno Smith's playing, but that era of Derek Carr and maybe Geno over the last 3 years. So, but just like always, appreciate what you do, and first listen of the day, and go Raiders.
Georgia Raider, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. Guaranteed money is what matters, right? It's funny in the NFL contracts. It's like you look at and it's like funny money, right? Like you could talk about a guy like say, Garrett Wilson, who I talked about in the first segment. Matter of fact, let me see what his money is real quick so I can give you a better example of what it is. Okay, $130 million contract extension, $90 million guaranteed. He could earn $130 million if he hits everything. Every bonus, every incentive, everything that he needs to hit, be in every game, all that, he can hit that $130 million. Like that's the most that it can max out at. In reality, his guaranteed money is $90 million. So more likely, Garrett Wilson's contract is $90 million. And in the final 2 years of his deal, 29 and 30, he has no guaranteed money. So if they cut him, right, they all of a sudden, they have very little dead cap money. So another great example, remember when Russell Wilson got cut from Denver? Remember they had like $95 million worth of dead money? That's because that was all guaranteed money that Russell Wilson was going to get. So he walked out of the building with $95 million in his bank account. So that's why he was able to sign with the Steelers for the league minimum, because he was already paid. All the money that he was guaranteed over the course of his contract that he had signed with the Denver Broncos, he had to take with him because that was guaranteed, right? But the contracts in the NFL are absolutely, there's one number, which is the ego number or the agent number, the one that says, oh, I got this player this amount of money. I got Garrett Wilson $130 million. Nah, not really. You got him $90 million, right? That's the reality of it. Colton Miller, great example, has the last 2 years, last year and then this year, has no guaranteed money. If the Raiders were to move on from him and just say they wanted to cut him, like say he didn't make it out of training camp, he literally there'd be $12 million plus of salary cap savings if they moved on from him, right? They have like $3 million in dead cap money, and that's just a prorated bonus that he's getting. That's what that would be if they moved on from him. So that's how, NFL contracts are funny. NBA contracts, no. What you say that you signed for, that's what you're getting. Baseball, same thing. NFL, not so much. As far as Geno Smith and Derek Carr, that kind of comparison, I think they'd be in the same tier. If DC was still playing and, was 2016 through 2020 or 2021, 20, whatever, before Josh McDaniels arrived, DC, I think him and Geno Smith, if Geno Smith was playing like he has the last couple of years, they'd probably be in the same tier, right? Neither one of them are elite. Neither one of them are bad. I think that they're both in the, 12 to 15 range as far as like quarterback rankings. If you were going to put a number on them, I think 12 to 15. Only thing Geno has that DC doesn't have is he has the mobility and the willingness to run, as DC didn't really have that after 2016, after the injury that he had at the Coliseum on Christmas Eve. So I think that would be the big difference. DC was very clutch. If you got him in a one-score game and he got the ball last, you felt pretty good that he was going to get you up and down the field. Geno Smith, he's had his struggles in the red zone. So, I think that they both have warts. I think they are both really good. Geno Smith has just come on later in his career, where Derek Carr really started his career pretty good, right? Pretty hot and continued it pretty consistently. You knew what you were going to get from DC. I feel like you know what you're going to get from Geno Smith. Just got to clean up the issues in the red zone. So thanks so much for that call. Definitely appreciate you. I hope that cleared things up at least a little bit. Got a text from Raider Dan in Rochester, New York. We'll get to tomorrow. George and the OC will get to tomorrow. We'll have more calls and texts. We'll have more news and notes. We'll have plenty of conversation as well. The Raider Squad Show is actually being pushed until Thursday. So normally we've been doing it Monday and Wednesday at 7:30 a.m., but we're going to do it on Thursday. So here you go. There's going to be a little bit of fluctuation, but I do appreciate all the support. Chantel Chan, Lincoln Kennedy, and myself, we've been doing, I think, a really good job. We're 5 shows in, so we're going to keep the party rolling. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you subscribe to this show, you subscribe to the podcast on the YouTube page, you're already good to go. It's a 1 hour strong, 1 hour long live stream that we do this week, Monday and Thursday. So look out for that as well. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.